listening, sending in your feedback to the show's social media pages, which are on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and now on YouTube. Most importantly, please spread the word about the show. Post on your social media, tell your friends, share my social media posts and videos. Everybody deals with grief. We are all in this together, and the best thing any of us can do is to support each other through that. Also, make sure you're following the show on your favorite listening platform. Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen, we're everywhere. Give us a 5-star review. By the way, if you don't know how to leave a 5-star review, check out our website, ourdeadads.com. Scroll down and it'll show you how to do it step by step. If you really you want to support us in another way, there's a button at the top of ourdeadads.com that says donate. You can go in there, one-time donation, or you can become a monthly contributor. For everybody who donates, I'm going to publicly thank you by reading off a list of all the donors at the end of every episode. Any amount helps, and I truly appreciate all of it. I love doing this podcast, and I know you do as well. But let's face it, podcasts are not cheap to run. So if you love the content and you love what you're hearing, if you want to make sure that I'm going to do this for a long time, advocating for the grief community and continuing to share these stories, go on over there and throw us a few bucks. It's so appreciated. There will be a merch store very soon. It's almost finished. Give us a few more days, and that will also be on ourdeadads.com. Okay, we're going to do things a little bit differently today. This is episode number 34, and for the very first time, I'm doing a live interview. I've done some live bonus episodes. We have a full interview today. We're streaming right now on TikTok and YouTube. And if you're brand new to the show, do me a favor, follow me on TikTok and YouTube. Both accounts are under the username at OurDeadDadsPod. Spread the word and help the show grow as far and wide as possible. My guest today is the reason that those of you watching on TikTok are doing so. He's an author, a true crime podcaster, and a legendary TikTok influencer and current events news reporter. I'm talking about Justin Shepard. Justin, welcome to the show. Technical glitch. I can't hear you. Oh no. Justin broke it. Uh-oh. I can hear you.
How about now? Better?
There we go.
Okay, I had to make a couple changes to settings. Sorry about that.
That's a, we do it. It was working.
We've been having technical difficulties on this, but thank you for having me, Nick. I appreciate being here and the opportunity to have this conversation and share this story with you.
Oh, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. You reached out to me, just so everybody's got a little bit of background. You had reached out. You saw one of the Facebook posts a few months ago when I was looking for some guests, and you reached out and said, I've got a story that I don't really know if it fits with what you do. And we've had some conversations, and yeah, it absolutely does. I'm so glad that we got a chance to get to know each other and talk about all this and get to collaborate a lot. I know that there will be a lot more of it. But yeah, you've got quite an incredible story, and a lot of your listeners already know that. You have the lead video on your TikTok page, which one of the pinned videos has about 16 million views and gets into what we're about to talk about. As everybody is finding out, this podcast is about grief, loss, trauma, and until today, all of the stories that I have heard about, that I guess to talk about, relate to somebody who has since passed. That is not the case with you. We are talking, in your case, about somebody who is still living.
Correct. Yeah, we're talking about somebody who's alive, and you mentioned the video that's pinned on my page. Yeah, so it was interesting. Just to give you a little background on that. That was still fairly new. Basically, for those of y'all who are listening who don't know the backstory, I've been no contact with my mom. It'll be from the time that we're recording this episode. Next month, it will be 6 years since her and I last spoke. And the trend, people think that no contact is a trend or it's a fad, and it's not. And we can talk more about that later. But it's something that 26% of millennials and Gen Z, are part of. Our 26% of millennials and Gen Z are no contact with a parent. I don't have the numbers on Gen X, but I know that there's a fair amount of them as well. And it basically is people starting to prioritize their peace and their well-being, and it's dismantling the idea that you have to keep people in your life just because they're family. And again, we can get more into that. But the video that you see, I had never intended to go viral on TikTok or become like a social media person. And I'm grateful for it because it's what I do full time now. But my wife was like, you should just share your story. And so I shared it, didn't expect anything to happen. And I woke up the next day with 46,000 followers. And it kind of has kept growing from there. And that story was just the final catalyst. It doesn't, really, it doesn't convey everything, the decades leading up to it. So
Right.
we can talk about all that as much or as little as you want.
This is this is your show. We can talk. Honestly, you're going to be the one to decide how much or how little we talk about. Um, let's wind the clock back a little bit and talk about how things led to going zero contact with your mom.
Like the final catalyst?
Sure.
Is that what you, okay. So the video, basically, the video that you're talking about, and again, we'll start there and we can work backwards, right? So that was the final catalyst of what made me, I was just done, basically.
Right.
So we had gone down, well, I'm going to go back a little bit further than that.
Okay.
So that year, which was 2018, was a really bad year for us as a family. We went into contact in 2019, but you'll see where this is going. My wife had lost a cousin that was like a brother to her. She lost a grandparent. We lost our beloved dog. There was trauma on my side. There was loss on my side. And it was just really coming off one of the worst years we had ever had. And the biggest thing, though, that we were coming off of was a pregnancy loss. And there's a lot of people out here who know that, pregnancy losses they suck and they're terrible and they're painful and they hurt. And so we were coming off of that. And it got to be around the holiday times. And initially people were supposed to come up and we had kind of gone a little, for lack of a term, dark, because we were mourning, we were grieving that loss plus everything else that happened. And then, we get to November and before Thanksgiving, and I reach out to my mom, I'm like, what are we doing for the holidays? And she's like, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going to my brother's house. And I was like, okay, I thought we had plans for you to come up here. And she was, this is actually a part, I've not told this story at all. So she was like, I was like, well, I thought you had plans to come up here to Nashville. And she was like, well, I didn't hear from you. So I just made my own plans. And I'm like, she's like, but then like, as a passing gesture, she's like, well, you can come to his house too. I'm like, all right, whatever.
Oh, thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the afterthought. So we decide to go down there begrudgingly because her attitude had been whatever. And we walk into my uncle's house and my uncle's happy to see us, as much as he can be, I suppose. And she comes in, my brother's there, his kids are there. Alyssa, my wife, and I are there. And she comes in and completely snubs my brother and I, doesn't talk to really us at all in passing. She goes and sits at the kids' table with my niece and nephew and my uncle's kid, and then leaves without telling anybody. And I'm supposed to be staying at her house that night. So,
oh boy.
And the other thing that happened while we were there is we had brought our dog Zoe, who has since passed this past year, and she cut her. I don't know exactly what happened. If my uncle's dogs, like through the fence, bit her paw, or she hurt her nail, but she tore open a paw, so we had patched it. This was on Christmas Eve. This was on Christmas, so this was on Christmas, a day or two before Christmas, and so there was nobody that could get her in locally because we didn't have a vet in Atlanta where this was. And so basically we called our vet. They're like, yeah, we can get her in tomorrow. So like, okay, I'm sorry, we got to go home. And she didn't really care. Right. So anyways, fast forward a little bit. And I call her up, we've had conversations, since then. I mean, it was a weird experience. My wife and I talked about how weird of an experience it was. And we get back, and in February, we found out, we had found out we were pregnant again, but we had waited a little bit longer. And so I called her up and I had a really kind of fun way of I thought it was a fun way of telling her. So I have a rocking horse that was mine when I was a kid. So it's from the early 80s. It's very nice quality, things like that. And the deal with that rocking horse, because it got lent out to family members throughout the year, was that I would always get it back if and when I were to have kids.
Okay.
So the rocking horse had made its way back from all the people and it was sitting in the basement in her house. But my niece liked to it's got this yarn mane and tail, to pull it out. And so and at the same time, it's like 40 years old, right? You're late, in its third, like
Yeah,
late 30s,
it's a
early
relic.
40s. It's been passed around to family after family. It's not, in the perfect shape anymore. But she had always said that, hey, whenever you get to the point, I'll redo it for you.
Okay.
And so she knew that we were trying to have kids because of the loss and everything like that. And so we find out that we're pregnant. So I call her up and I said, hey, and I asked her, like, hey, what are you doing? She, it was just chatter, just
Small
small
talk.
talk. And she says, and I said to her, I was like, well, hey, have you started working on the rocking horse yet? And she's like, no. She's like, I've been busy doing this, and this. And she was like, oh, I'll get to it at some point. I haven't forgotten about it. And I said, okay. I said, well, we're going to need it by September. And she goes, okay, well, if I get some time, I'll try to, I'll try to work on it or whatever. She's like, I said, no, I said, I don't think you understood what I was saying. I was like, we're going to need it by September. And she knew exactly what we're saying. My mom is not a stupid person. I've had people ask, like, hey, did she get what you're saying? She got it. And she's like, her whole tone, her whole demeanor changed. She goes, I heard what you said, Justin. What do you want me to say to you? And I just said, you know what? I'll talk to you later. And that was less than
a conversation.
Huh?
Just end the conversation at that point.
Yeah, I said, I'll just talk to you later. I'm going to go. So I hang up the phone. And normally, this was not an uncommon dynamic. Like, she would say or do something, and then I would like call her in a few days and be like, so I'm so sorry. Whatever. And I didn't do that this time, but I did call her because I needed to ask her something, and she didn't answer my phone. And I called her a couple more times and didn't answer my phone. So basically, what happens was a couple days after that, I get a large, very long, very interesting text message from her that is very hard to understand, basically talking about what a piece of garbage son I am, what a piece of garbage my wife is, but we'll make great parents. But she doesn't want anything to do with us, basically. And so
you're a
now,
piece of garbage, and yet you're going to make a good parent.
Yeah, exactly. So it was very hypocritical. So and we could get into some of this prior to that. So I normally in these types of cases, I would grovel back to her like, no, mom, I'm so sorry. Let's work it out. Let's find a common ground. Let's do this. And I just said, you know what? My mindset at that point, and we'll talk about why I think she took the route that she took this time. But my mindset at that point was, we came off of a terrible year. We lost our dog. We lost a baby, pregnancy. Alyssa lost a lot of family members. We had a lot of stuff happen. We just told you some incredibly big news, and this was the response, like to take something that was supposed to be a happy, joyous occasion and basically try to ruin it. Basically. Yeah, to shit on it. Yeah. And so I called my brother. Oh, that's putting the cart before the horse. My now ex sister-in-law calls me and says, why did your mom just drop this rocking horse off at our house? And I'm like, that's when I was like, I'm going to call her. And that's what kind of all this. And she said, I'm not going to call you back, and gave me the whole barrage. And I got the horse back, obviously, and I redid it for my daughter. It looks really cute. And that was it, though. And I think, and my wife, has put it perfectly, I think. What my mom realized is that she would never come before a baby. She would never come before my kid, ever. She could play the card a little bit with my wife, because I would always try to, and I'll just say this as a husband, and my wife honestly should have left me, because she had to endure this crap from my mother for a long time, and I would always try to force her into the situation. I'm like, well, let's just try to, this is just how she is. Let's just try to find some common ground. And it wasn't the case. But Alyssa wasn't doing anything wrong. It was my mom that was bullying and berating her, and I should have taken that stand long before a kid. And that's just the honest truth. And so, I mean, that was it. Now, fast forward a little bit, we actually ended up needing it by July. Jokingly, okay. Yeah. So my daughter was was due in September, but she came July 5th. So she was born at 29 weeks and 3 days. She almost, my wife was already in antepartum. My wife almost died. My daughter almost died. It was an emergency C-section. They had to wait to do surgery till they had enough blood up there. It was a very scary moment, and my brother knew about it. I didn't call my mom because of everything. I didn't need the stress. But my brother knew, and my brother could have, I don't know if he did, I've never asked him, but could have called my mom. And by the time the kid was born, between Facebook and everything, she knew that we had had a preemie. She knew that it was challenging, and we never once heard from her. The 43 days in the NICU, never heard from her. My daughter is now 5.5. We have never heard from her. She's made zero attempts, zero interest to be part of this child's life. But the honest to God part of it is my daughter's better off because of it.
Right.
And it took me a long time to realize that.
There's a lot that we're going to dive into from this point on, but I would like to go back a little bit first. What
Okay.
was your relationship with your mom like?
That's a great question, and it's a very interesting question because when you're a kid and you're going through some stuff and that's your family dynamic, you don't know that it's not normal, I guess. So I always thought my mom and I were really close. My brother, I was the youngest. My brother's 6.5 years older than I am. And it was her and I just were always close. When he went on, we were both into cars, both in the same music. There was a lot of things that we had in common. And I loved my mom. It was a great relationship. But I think that at that point, what it was, well, I'm going to say great relationship with a caveat, and I'll circle back. But I think a lot of it is at that point in time, she had complete control over me, right? So my mom hasn't been diagnosed this, but she exhibits pretty much checks every single box of that of a narcissist, and particularly a malignant narcissist. She goes out of her way to create trouble and wreak havoc. She just did it last week. I got called from some family members where she did not belong, wreaking havoc around Christmas. But then the punishments and stuff, when I go back and look at it, like apparently being sent to juvenile hall for not picking up a hat, that's not a normal punishment. That happened. Yeah. So I was like 13 years old. I'm into cars. We had growing up, my mom had a 59 MG that had fallen into disrepair in the driveway. Yeah, it was a great car, but she let it fall into disrepair. And I wasn't old enough to do anything with it. But she sold it before I turned 16 and could have done anything with it. But I liked MGs because of that British cars. I still like weird cars. And so I had bought an MG hat at an auto show, like a British car show. And back then I spent like money I'd earned, like mowing lawns and things like that. I spent like $30 on this hat. And like most teenage boys, I wasn't necessarily the cleanest, right? And so like I'd come home and I'd like throw my hat on the couch or throw it on a table or whatever. And so she came home and said at one point, if you leave this hat out one more time, I'm throwing it away. And so I left it out one more time. I'm also, by the way, very, very ADHD, so I forget things a lot. But I left it out, so she throws it in the trash. And it was a trash can that had one of those lids, like where you step on the foot pedal and it open and close. So she throws it in. And I reach in and grab it. I got my hand on the top of the trash can, and she sits on the lid. And so I can't get my hand out. It's my wrist is stuck between it, and I'm trying to pull it out. I still got my hand on the hat, and finally I get it yanked out, and she falls off the trash can. And so she calls the police and tells them that I hit her. And literally, this is a moment that was seared into my mind forever. So again, this is back in the days before cell phones, right? So the neighborhood that I lived in was a 2-phase neighborhood, but you couldn't, the 2 phases didn't connect. So phase 1 had a pool. And so I left our neighborhood, ran up the top of it, crossed the street over a bridge to the other neighborhood, because at the pool there was a phone, and my dad had an 800 number that he got, because another story to unpack is that I was not allowed to call my dad or talk to my dad. So he got an 800 number. So wherever we were, we could always talk to him. Like we could call him anytime. It was toll free. And anyways, long and short of the story here is I'm talking to him. He basically says, call 911, tell them what's going on. He's like, I'll put you in a hotel and I'll get you to Miami tomorrow. And I was like, okay, fine. So just tell the police, that you just want to go and get a few things, some clothes, some toiletries, and I'll put you up in a hotel. I'll deal with all this. So while I'm on the phone with 911, a police officer rolls up. And this is where I found out my mom called the police, because I don't think I had realized that at that point. Well, maybe I did. Actually, I did, because she had said she was calling. And he takes 911. You can hear 911 calling on his walkie-talkie, saying, "Hey, this is what's going on." And he just kind of ignores it, takes the phone from me. I said, "Hey, I'm on the phone now, and they'd like to talk to you." He takes the phone from me, hangs it back up, throws me against the fence, cuffs me, puts me in the car. And then we drive back to my house. I'm sitting there. I'm like hysterical, like in tears. And this is Atlanta, by the way. I'm in Fulton County. So
Okay.
I lived in North Atlanta, but so like Alpharetta, but this is Fulton County. So I get taken down to downtown Atlanta, Fulton County Juvenile Hall, and I have to stay there for 4 days until I'm willing to apologize to her.
You have to apologize to your mother before you're going to be released.
Correct.
Was that your mother's choice? Did she basically say, "He's your parent until he's ready to apologize"?
Yeah, that was her choice. At that point, there was no stepdad in the picture. It was just her and I. And my brother was home, I think.
Wow. So this is about almost 30 years ago, and the cop just completely takes your word for it, believes her saying that you hit her. Doesn't doesn't sound like doesn't sound like he asked you your side of the story. Just
Did not.
cuffs.
Did not care about my side of the story.
Unbelievable. All right. So 4 days later, you decided you were going to apologize to your mom.
I apologize. I wanted to get out of there. I would have done anything.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um,
So
how were things with your mom immediately after that?
you want to know something? I don't remember. I have a complete lapse of memory between then and like 15 or 16 years old. I don't remember. I don't remember anything. And that's apparently I've talked to my therapist about it's apparently a common trauma response to kind of protect the brain. That I don't remember. I mean, I guess we went back to normal at some point. And to be very frank with you, that's not the first time she had me put somewhere. She also had me put in mental health facilities twice.
For what reason?
I honestly don't know. Those I don't know. I think at one point, we had a very abusive. So she was married a total of. She married my dad twice. So if you count that and her other two husbands, 4 times, but 3 times, 3 different people. And my stepdad number 2 or stepdad number 1, the first stepdad was very abusive to all of us, like physically, verbally, everything. And so I think I forget what had happened. I don't remember if he had beaten me up or beaten her up, or I don't think it was her. Because when he finally laid her hands on her enough, she finally left him. But I think that I made the comment to her. I don't remember how old I was. It was definitely under between 11 and 13. I said, if he tries any of that stuff again, I said I'll kill him.
Yeah.
Like if he tries to do the stuff. And so I think that was one of the reasons. I don't remember if he was. That one's kind of a blur. And then I don't remember why the second time she did it.
So you're speaking in defense of your mother, and she took that as reason enough to have you put into.
To be fair, it's defense of me. It was defense of me.
No, I understand that, but I mean, still, when you're talking to her, you're saying if he puts his hands on you again, I'm going to kill him. So
Yeah.
it's defense of you, but by default, defense of her as well, and she has you put into a psych hospital.
Yep.
When you finally ended up going no contact with your mom about 6 years ago, was that the first time that you got no contact with her?
It was the first. No, but when I had gone no contact with her in the past, it wasn't no contact. It was just we're not speaking right now.
Okay.
It was never intended to be a permanent thing. Like now, it's a permanent thing, and
right.
And then it was going to be temporary, but we did have bouts because that's one thing about my family and that dynamic is that they'll just go years not talking to each other. Then all of a sudden, like my brother and my dad didn't talk for 13 years at all. When he was a kid, and that was a lot due to. Well, it was due to. I don't want to say it's. I don't want to pin all that on my mom. A lot of that was my dad too, but. That's just how it was. My grandfather, my mom's dad, he would stop talking to people like family members, brothers, and you wouldn't speak for 20 years. And that's just kind of how the dynamic was. It's very immature, and either be part of your life or don't, but it's because and a lot of it's because you don't get your way. And that's kind of what this was. And that's the dynamic that was created, and that's the dynamic that was perpetuated because of it.
Right. I'm not laughing at your story. I'm laughing kind of at my own.
I know. I know the absurdity of the whole thing. Yes.
Yeah, the absurdity of it all. I'm thinking back to other family situations in my family where there were family members for the stupidest reasons didn't talk for years. Finally figured it out past it, but just the absurdity of it all. And then even with my dad, I had several bouts of not talking to him, sometimes for a couple days, weeks, multiple times for several months. We won't get into any of that now. If anybody wants to know about my story, go listen to our Dead Tats podcast, episode 1, and you'll hear all about it. What was the, prior to the permanent one, what was the longest amount of time that you and your mom went without speaking?
Probably a year,
A year.
give or take.
Um,
I don't remember why, because there was always dumb reasons as to why.
of
Like we
course.
wouldn't talk. Like it could be like a week, it could be a month, it could be whatever. That was her thing. It was silent treatment. It was like, let's just give silent treatment. And I would oftentimes do part of it, but for a little while, and then I would always come back around. But that's kind of part of the dynamic, because she would always hold the cards. She would stop talking to me, I would come back around, which gives her the upper hand in that
Yeah,
dynamic.
she's got the marketing chip at that point.
100%.
Now, when you were having these periods of time when the two of you weren't talking, were you and Alyssa together by this point, or is this before you guys were together? So, like, basically, my question is, was she being exposed to all of this as well?
I don't remember if we had no talk. I know that I was not talking to my dad at the time that Alyssa and I met, and she was a big catalyst to why we started talking. And I don't think, and since this is live, she might be in the chat, so she can tell me if I'm wrong. But I don't think that I had any instances of me not really talking to her for long periods of time. She correct me if I'm wrong. When I was with her, but she was subjected to a lot. She just said she goes, I think you were talking to her entire relationship. So she had to endure, and I'll just call it what it is. Let's not sugarcoat it. Had to endure abuse from her. The thing about Alyssa is she's wonderful. She really is. And, she would come up, like my mom had tornado damage at one point in our house, nothing like to the house, but like trees had fallen down. She came to help clean that up. She was always helpful, always polite. And my mom would always treat her like crap. Like even during our wedding. Okay. So we had moved, I'll give you another fun little quick story. We had moved out to Texas for work. And I think that that's where things really kind of started to come apart, as she was not happy that we left. But she never came to visit us, ever. Not one time. We lived in Texas for, I think, from 2010 to 06 or 07, so like 7 years. The only time she came out was for the wedding. That was it. She stayed the minimum amount of time and left. She wore all black to the wedding. She came into the bride's side. I don't think she had ever met any of the bridesmaids. Gave every one of them a hug and talked to her, introduced herself, and completely snubbed the bride. Like didn't acknowledge her, nothing. At the same time, my mom faked a seizure at our wedding.
How do you fake a seizure?
Well, so a little background on that. Right before we left Atlanta, my mom had been in a bad car accident.
Okay.
She got hit by a MARTA bus, MARTA's Metro Atlanta Rail Transit Authority, on the side of her. She had a Mercedes Benz. She got hit on the side of her Mercedes on the driver's side, broke the window out with her head, and I supposedly had this TBI. Well, the medications that she was on were psych medications. They weren't. There was no even off-label use for treating them for what she claims that she had. And the seizures would always come up conveniently. So she wasn't really having seizures. She was never on seizure medication. But the biggest giveaway about it was I asked her, I said, well, you're having these seizures, because this went on for a long time. I said, you're having these seizures. I said, how do you still have a driver's license?
Right.
And she says, oh, well, I talked to my doctor and I convinced him not to, take it away from me. I'm like, I'm not stupid. There's no doctor in the world that's going to risk his career to let you keep your license. So I knew that it was fake. So she faked the seizure at the wedding. She didn't come to the brunch. She left with her cousin, and that was basically it. And yeah, that was it. That was the only time she came. It was kind of, and by the way, the wedding was televised for the record on CMT, like legit televised. It was a pilot episode for a show. And I know I'm full of all these interesting little tidbits, but which, by the way, anybody who wants to watch it, if you go to my my website, justthenickofcrime.com, you can scroll down at the bottom and you'll see if you want to watch a very boring wedding show, you can watch it. But anyway, so there was actually supposedly because we did this like Gatsby themed wedding, like 20s kind of thing. And there was a speakeasy that they put up for it. And we never got the footage from it. But my understanding is that the guests were like the way she had been acting, her behavior, everything, they were all talking about it in that speakeasy. Is what we learned after the fact. So it was,
Is that probably why you didn't get the footage? Because
maybe it might be. I would have loved that footage. I've reached out, I reached out in the years, since that, and it's gone, but it would have been interesting to have nevertheless. But yeah, that was kind of the dynamic, and she was just, she really treated Alyssa poorly. She would make lies up about her. She at one point tried to convince me that my best friend and her were having an affair. And I mean, this is no disrespect to either one of them, the way I say this. There was no world where Alyssa would have ever dated this friend. And there's no world where my friend would have ever dated Alyssa. That particular friend went after, how do I put this politely? He would literally go after literal strippers. Those are the girls that he would go after, the women that he would go after. And Alyssa is the exact opposite of that. So they were very, very different in who they were. We all got along great. We're all friends, but like that just would have never happened. And so she tried to make that up at one point in time. So yeah,
So basically, she's starting shit for the sake of starting shit.
Oh, and that she loves starting shit for the sake of starting shit.
And I can obviously see the similarities between your wedding and Christmas. Now, at the wedding, she gets there and greets all the bridesmaids. She completely walks past. You guys get to Christmas dinner, and she says, "Next, she sits at the kids'
well, these are different years. Well, these are different years. The wedding, the wedding, we got married. We got married in 11,
right?
And this dinner was in 18.
It's nice to see that she didn't change.
No, she didn't change. Actually, if anything, she got worse. But what's interesting about my mom too is she's always able to get out of things. Like she's been investigated by the IRS. She got out of it. She's been investigated for arson. She got out of it. She's been investigated for insurance fraud. She got out of it. And but in fairness, the arson and insurance fraud were the same incident. So
okay,
she had a property she didn't tell anybody about that she owned in Athens, Georgia, and it burned down mysteriously, apparently.
Okay.
So
nothing.
I don't know what name of it. Yeah, well, she owns a house in Daytona. She didn't tell anybody about it. I learned about it through a family member that just like, oh, she owns a house in Daytona. So
she's got a few bucks.
She's got a few. I don't know what all she has or doesn't have, but yeah, the woman hasn't worked in probably 25 years. I'll say that. But let's you know what though, while we're there, let's talk about that real quick. Okay.
Sure. Let's do
it. When my mom did work, she, here's what I'll give. I will always give credit where credit's due. Okay. In the 80s, my mom owned a company, a printing company, and at the time she was one of two women at that level in that business. And we lived in Memphis at the time, and basically she had gone to some conference at one point in time, and a man told her that I'm going to take every one of your, or what he said. No, that's not what he said. He said, you need to go back in the kitchen where you belong, take care of your kids. That's what you should be doing. Leave this to the big boys. It was something like that. And so my mom said she stood nose to nose with him and said, in 6 months, I will have every one of your clients.
Wow.
And she did. She took them all and shut them down, got them out of business. So, she's very good to look up to from that perspective. Well, during the 90s, her best friend got a divorce. Maybe she had known since high school. And so she decided to say, well, hey, why don't you move up to Atlanta? They were in Florida. Why don't you move up to Atlanta? You can teach me. She was in mortgages. You can teach me the mortgage business because I don't want to do printing anymore. Printing's, gone the way of this, it's not what it used to be. And we'll do that. If you think about the 90s and mortgages, you think about subprime lending. Now,
oh yeah,
I was under the impression that there was no subprime lending going on with her company, but apparently that's not true. But that's based on her. So Her best friend, who was my godmother,
Okay.
fast forward, teaches her everything. She's making back then $400,000 a year. Okay, back in the 90s,
That's
and
that's a lot of money for the
it's a
90s.
lot of money now,
Well,
but it
yeah,
was
but I mean,
it was a
that's
hell
like
of a lot of money back then.
it's
Yeah,
like royalty money 30 years ago, and especially
yeah,
living down south where the cost of living is even lower.
yeah. And at the time, our house, I think it cost like she'd tout like our house for like 140,000 back then. Back then, boomers could buy their house for like 100 grand and like 3 raspberries, but it's so we didn't even have that much of a mortgage. She was just socking money away, and she would never
Yeah.
spend any of it. And I didn't know that I didn't know till later she had let it slip at one point in time. Well, anyway, so my godmother, her best friend, is going up to New York for her brother's birthday, 50th birthday, and her mom, my mom has known these families since she was a teenager. Her mom flies up as well, and while she's getting off the plane, has a stroke, and while she's in New York, and so my mom, she calls my mom and says, "Hey, this is what's going on." My mom says, "Of course, it's your mom. Take care of her. Do what you got to do." And they're trying to determine, are we going to get her back to Miami? Are we going to keep her in New York? What are we going to do? And while all this is going on, my mom, they're in the same company, basically fires her secretary via FedEx, doesn't tell anybody anything, clears all of her stuff out. So when she comes back, all of her stuff is gone. And she told the partner in the company that her friend was committing mortgage fraud.
Oh boy.
And years later, I'll say this, I'm kind of jumping a little bit. When my mom and I went no contact, there was a lot of people I wasn't speaking with because in my mom's mind, or the way that at least it was brought up to me, is that you were loyal. You weren't, it was not, it was unloyal, or you're being disloyal if she had an issue with you and you didn't have an issue with that person, you still had to take her side and have her back with this. So my godmother, her friend, I didn't get to talk to. At the time everything happened, she wasn't talking to her own mother, my grandmother. So I hadn't spoken to my grandmother in like 10 or 12 years. She wasn't I wasn't allowed to talk to either of my aunts, which includes a lot of cousins. There was, I think that there were other people too along, but those were the biggest ones. And so and some of these feuds, by the way, had started well before I was even born over some of the stupidest stuff, which I'll tell you. But like when everything went down, I was like, and I kind of started to take off the blinders. I started calling people. I was like, I just want to hear your side of the story. You tell me your side of the story and I'll tell you what I've heard. And the interesting thing that I found out when doing this from both my aunts, from my mom's, former best friend, from my grandmother, from everybody that I spoke to regarding this, is that I would hear a very similar story to what my mom told, but every one of these people were victims of her. And that's what added up. And her friend said to her, it's like, well, I heard that you had committed mortgage fraud, and that's what happened. And she said, no, your mother was the one committing mortgage fraud, and I knew about it, and that's why she didn't want me there anymore. And that would make sense because what ended up happening was she's like, I helped her get another job, within a different branch of this company, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, nobody, and it's kind of goes back to the doctor thing. Like if you're committing mortgage fraud, no company is going to take you and have you near mortgages. It makes no sense.
Yeah, you are out.
Yeah, you're out. And so, that's kind of some of the stuff. And then, with my aunt, I learned, I had very little to do with my two aunts, my mom's two sisters, because for one of the sisters, there had been an argument over the way that my mom told me it was about jewelry that one of her sisters, my aunt's friends, when they were teenagers, stole some jewelry from my grandmother. And that was the case. And my mom got blamed for it. And I spoke to her, she goes, it was never jewelry. She says, it was a record. And she goes, and it was your mom's record that it was. And she's like, and it wasn't stolen either. She was like, nobody ever had it. She's like, and she got mad at me. She's like, because I asked my friends, like, do you have this record? And she didn't. And I was like, what do you want me to do? Go like ransack her house? And so that was from the time my mom was like 15 or 16. And then they had rekindled things. And then my mom accused this same aunt of stealing a gold razor. And she's like, why would I want her razor? And that happened in like the mid to late 70s. And so I wasn't allowed to have, because of that, I was not allowed to have a relationship with the aunt.
Oh my God.
So
A razor from
yeah,
50 years ago.
and then real quick to the other aunt story. This was the
Okay.
one that really really got me. And this is my, out of all my family members, this aunt is my absolute favorite one. I'm very grateful to be able to have a relationship with her. But before I was born, my mom and dad split up. And my mom had my brother. My dad had moved to Indiana for a job. Little background on my dad: he is a former naval fighter pilot, so he always had a plane or licenses or something like that. I mean, it might have been his plane, but it would have been a plane that he had access to. And so he had gone up to Indiana and was flying back and forth to see my brother, because he had started this job. And this was in the late 70s, very, very, very early 80s, talking about like 80, 81. And my dad was making 6 digits back then as a director of advertising for, I think, Albertsons. And so that's why he was there. So my mom sees dollar signs. It's like, oh, I'm gonna get back with him. Well, prior to that, though, when they had separated, my mom went and got a townhouse on her own and said to my aunt, like, hey, I could use help with this townhouse. I could use help with with my kid. Why don't we move in together? My aunt was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Whatever. So my aunt had to borrow money from my grandparents for the down payment, and they both worked together with their paychecks, fixing up the townhouse, making it nice, etc. And one day my aunt comes home and there's a for sale sign in front of this townhome. And she says to my mom, she's like, what are you doing? I live here too. She's like, oh, well, me and, my ex are getting back. I'm trying to leave names out of it, but me and my ex are getting back together. And, I'm selling the townhouse. She's like, well, were you going to tell me about it? And she said, well, now you know, basically. And yeah, basically now you know. And so then my mom wanted all of the money, all the profits from the house. And so they got into an argument about that. And basically my aunt settled with, look, just give me the money to pay mom and dad back. Give me the money to pay back my parents. And so, or our parents. And so she agreed to that. But after agreeing to that, my grandmother apparently calls this aunt up and says, hey, you need to get your stuff out of the house, because I was talking to her and she said in passing that she was going to take all of your stuff to Indiana with her. So she basically steal all of her stuff. And so with that heads up, she rented a truck while my mom was at work, got everything out of the house. The only thing she left was a closet full of clothes. And because she's like, I'll get those later. She's no way she's going to take these clothes because we're both very different sizes, very different heights. Like
no use for the clothes.
She came home, all the clothes were gone. Just stole all the clothes.
For what purpose if you can't wear them?
To be an ass.
That's an incredible ass. You can't even use the clothes, and you're going to take them just for spite.
And my grandmother, who, by the way, is going to be next month, she'll be 92. She confirmed this story. So, and that woman, I don't think has ever told a lie in her life.
Right. And so that was the end of the house with your mom and your aunt.
That was the end of that. They moved to Indiana, got back together. I was born, and so on.
Unbelievable. For everybody who has just joined in the last few minutes, my name is Nick Gaylord. I run a podcast called Our Dead Dads, and I am here interviewing Justin Shepard for the show. He is telling an incredible story. Most of you who follow him already know a lot of it, but we are both really appreciative that you have joined us today.
Absolutely.
Justin, now that we've gotten a lot of the backside of that, let's move past the point where you and your mom have stopped talking.
Okay.
How do you begin to process this? Now, it sounds like this is a lifetime of shit that you've dealt with. Sounds like it was a recurring pattern with her. Your mom is still alive. You do not talk to her. And yet you still have to process the loss of that relationship. Because at this point, I'm assuming there's no going back.
No, there's no going back. There was a time there could have been going back, but my daughter's 5.5, and my daughter and my wife are the most important people in my life. My daughter especially, and my job as a parent is to make sure that I don't repeat this cycle, and I keep her safe from this type of abuse. That is my sole job as a dad. And, I don't, my daughter has asked about her, which is what led me to write the first book. But I refuse to trauma dump on her, and kind of, she's, first of all, she wouldn't understand. So when she asks questions about it, we just say, look, she's just not the nicest person, you know? And people are like, well, people have asked me, well, when you get old, when she gets older, if she wants to have a relationship with these people, would you let her? I said, well, if she's an adult and she wants to have a relationship, that's up to her. I will arm her with the information that she needs to know, but I'm not going to do what my mom did and prevent her from talking. But at the same time, my dad was born in 45. My mom was born in 52. I was older. My dad especially was older when I was born. I was a little bit older when my daughter was born. I think that is a problem time will solve.
Yeah, I agree with that. You had mentioned let's talk about the book and how that came to be. I believe it was probably about a couple of years ago when your daughter first asked you about your mom.
Hmm. Yeah, we
Is
were
that correct?
sitting at the kitchen table, and she goes, "Why haven't I ever met your mom?" She goes, "Daddy, why haven't I ever met your mom?" And I said, "Well, honey, my mom's just not the best person." And I was kind of struggling with what to say because I didn't expect that question. I mean, I knew I was going to get that question eventually, but I didn't expect it then. So I was kind of still going through like, hey, what do I say when this happens? And
Right.
so I kind of started to fumble with it and trauma dump. I mean, kids, I made it more complex than it needed to be because me just saying, hey, she's not a nice person would have sufficed. And so, anyways, I was like, so I talked to my therapist and I said, hey, I need a resource to have this discussion with my kid. What's out there? And she goes, there's nothing out there. A resource like this doesn't exist. And I said, okay. Well, and I didn't believe her. So there are a couple of TikTok therapists. They're not like TikTok therapists, but there's therapists who are on TikTok who I'm friends with, mutuals with. And I asked them and they're like, yeah, the resource doesn't exist for this. And so upon doing more research, I think I said it earlier in the show, one thing that I discovered was that 26% of millennials and Gen Z are no contact specifically with a parent. That's a quarter of us.
Right.
And a lot of us have kids, or a lot of us are going to be having kids. How do you have this conversation if you're one of the people who are trying to break this cycle? And so I wrote a book. It's called Boundaries. I'll show it. I can show it. I have it right here. And by the way, for anybody who's watching on TikTok, you can pick it up in the TikTok shop in my bio, along with my other book. I have three, but one of them sold out. But it's called Boundaries. And basically, what this book does, it does a couple things. It explains to your kids why you're no contact, limited contact with a family member in a way that's easy for them to understand and an easy way for them to digest that doesn't vilify that person. It also teaches them what a conditional relationship is. So, they can hopefully avoid those in the future. And I think the most important part of it is it teaches your kids how to set boundaries within a family. And I think that that's one of the things that we're very big on in our household is boundaries, whether it's body boundaries or just, feelings boundaries. To be able to say, hey, I don't like that. I'm setting this boundary and know that those boundaries are going to be respected. Because the dynamic that you set for your kids, what they learn, what's going to define who they are in relationships in their future is what they experience in their house. Right.
Right.
And so if my daughter sets a boundary and I ignore it, then what is the message sending her? That
Very bad.
yeah, that as a man I can ignore your message or what you're saying. So like I'll be playing with her or something, throwing her, roughhousing with her, and she'll be like, Dad, stop my boundaries. And you know what we do? We don't question, we immediately stop and say, okay, that's your boundary. I reinforce it and that's it. So that's how I want to be. I want her, as she has future relationships, that she learns that she needs to say no or my boundaries one time. That's it. Anything less than that or anything more than that is unacceptable.
Absolutely. And it's going to hopefully teach other people, whether not maybe people in your family, but also friends or people that you haven't even met yet, as they come into contact with her, when she expresses boundaries, hopefully they will respect them as well. And it will be a mutual respect. And hopefully she will also be able to, hopefully she won't encounter this, but if she ever does come across somebody who decides not to respect those boundaries, then she will also remove herself from that situation as quickly as she can.
Yeah, I mean that's what the goal is, right?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I don't have kids, but I love that you did this. It sucks that there wasn't a resource out there but this is definitely a resource that was very much needed, and obviously that's why you wrote it.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly why I wrote it, because I felt that there was a market. I knew that I wasn't the only person. And I'm gonna, for the TikTok folks, I'm gonna pin these for you guys if y'all are interested, and I will sign them, by the way, if you purchase them. And by the way, if there anybody who's listening to this later, if you go to the website, you can order the books, and I will sign them, and you should be able to put a note in there. These are what I have available right now. I am sold out of some, but I can sign them for you and send them out hardcover and softcover. But I think they're pinned.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, cool. It doesn't show me. So anyways, we can do that. But yeah, I knew that I was not the only one. And I wrote the book because, and it's a very cute book. And one thing that was really kind of a surprise from this book is how many adults it's actually helped. So that was one thing that I didn't expect. Like, I have adults that buy it for themselves. In fact, I don't know if she's still in here, but one of my mods, Judy, she has an interesting relationship with her ex-husband. And one of the biggest, and I always remember she sharing this with me, but she said that I showed your book to my ex-husband, and now he finally understands why our son wants nothing to do with his brother. So that's been something that it's been a game changer for a lot of adults too, learning things. And I didn't expect that. But I'm grateful. I'm glad that I've been able to create something and given the opportunity to create something that, is beneficial to so many.
Absolutely. Regarding your mom, now I can relate to some of what you've gone through because of the really toxic, complicated relationship that I had with my dad. He was. This is one of the things that we bonded over early. Is your dad was actually married more times than mine.
Yes, my dad has been married. What did I say? I think 7 times. Yeah.
7 times, and my dad was married and divorced 5 times. I'm the oldest of his 7 children that I know of, and he was also a narcissist. The world revolved around him, at least in his eyes. Nothing was his fault. Everything that happened was somebody else's fault. He was an X-ray technician for years. He lost a lot of jobs because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. If he wanted to tell his boss to go to hell, he would tell his boss to go to hell. But it was his boss's fault. It was always, no matter what happened,
so
always somebody else's fault.
There's actually an expression, and I have to give it my mom. This is my mom's expression, but a lot of what she says is projecting. And I love this expression, which is, they may not be right, but they're never wrong.
Right. Yeah.
They may not be right, but they are never wrong. So, and that's the same with my dad. That's the same with my mom. Now, my mom, like I said, I can't diagnose either one of them because I'm not that's not something that I'm, licensed to do. But so unofficially, though, I mean, it's very, to me, evident that they both exhibit the traits of NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. I know that my mom at one point apparently was also diagnosed with histrionic personality disorder back in her teens, but that's a term that they don't really use too much anymore. Whereas my mom is malignant, my dad is not. My dad doesn't go out of his way to cause trouble for people or stir the pot. He's just a very selfish, self-centered, self-serving individual. That's what he is. But my mom, so I talked about this earlier. I will tell you this. So I get a call. I get a call from a distant cousin, right? So it's my mom's first cousin's daughter. All right. So I guess it's a second or something. It doesn't matter. I'm just called distant cousin.
Okay.
And I said, and I answered and I said, if you're calling me, something's going on.
Right.
And she says, why is your mother in Daytona? And I said, I've not spoken to my mom in nearly 6 years. I don't know. And I was like, why? So basically what happened, my mom's first cousin, who wants nothing to do with her, is dying. She's in hospice and she's got dementia. And it's interesting. My mom likes to show up when people are near death's door. Remember that best friend I told you about earlier? When she was sick in hospice, she's since passed. My mom was talking about trying to get her to come live with her. So there's always some kind of she's trying to do or some game she's playing. So she shows up unannounced, unexpected, staying at apparently her house in Daytona that we're not supposed to know about. And she starts driving a wedge, showing up to the nursing home, showing up to the facility, driving a wedge between everybody, just stirring the pot, literally for no reason whatsoever. Like, she came in out of the blue, and this is how she chose to spend her Christmas instead of with the grandkids that she does speak with. You know, so it's like I said, it's just she'll go out of her way to cause trouble.
Right.
My dad won't do that.
Right, your dad will do that. But I mean, as far as why your mom does that, I mean, it's anybody's guess. I mean, obviously there is some undiagnosed stuff there, but I don't know. I mean, I guess because our brains don't work like that, we'll never be able to understand fully why she does that, why my dad would do that sometimes, why anybody does it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I like to stir the pot sometimes. It's just, I guess, part of being raised
Okay.
in that dynamic. And you can look at any of my clapback videos to see why, because those are all things that I could easily let go, but like, I love doing them, so I'm gonna continue doing them.
My wife is listening, and I know that she's gonna laugh at this because I like to stir the pot sometimes she doesn't. You know, you don't you don't go over a certain line. Still, who doesn't want to stir the pot just a little bit? I noticed one of the comments on TikTok, Jim Schmidt said, "Hey Jim, looking forward to seeing you again on Saturday." Jim said, "Let me go back to it." I think he said, "Did our dads go to the same school?" Because this sounds painfully familiar.
Well, real quick, somebody it's also on TikTok, Mama Braden said, she's still your mom. She loves you. And actually, I'm going to say she does not. She does not. My mom is, even though I can't formally diagnose her, my mom is a narcissist.
I'm so glad that came up because that was the question I was going to ask you. Do you think your mom still loves you?
No, she never did. Narcissists are incapable of love. They cannot love anybody but themselves. It doesn't matter who they are. They can't love their spouse. They can't love their parents. They don't. They can't love their kids. They can't love anybody. They can only love themselves, and it's not. They can't help it. It's part of NPD. Just having it, they are incapable of love. Now, I can't remember his name. My wife, who's in here, or I think is still here, might be able to tell us. But there's actually a guy who is narcissistic, diagnosed NPD. It's very rare to get a narcissistic diagnosis because most of them think they're perfect, so they won't go seek help. But there is a guy on TikTok who is a diagnosed narcissist, and he talks about all of this, and he talks about the way that he gets through life because you have to teach him empathy, and that's the closest you can get. And he's like, I'm trying to and that's the thing. He wants to learn. He wants to do better, but like, he can't love anybody. It's not that he doesn't want to love somebody. He just is incapable. And so it's a very interesting thing. It's a very interesting dynamic. And again, one thing that we have to dismantle, as people, as younger generations, is the idea that blood is thicker than water. That their family say you have to keep them in their life and you don't. And my argument to that is, if you wouldn't allow a complete stranger or a friend to treat you the way that sometimes family members will treat you, and I'm not talking about once or twice these one-offs, I'm talking about over and over and over and over again for years.
Yeah.
And you have the conversations and you try to make things better and it continues to be what it is. Why, if you wouldn't tolerate that from a spouse, if you wouldn't tolerate that from a friend, if you wouldn't tolerate that from a stranger, why are you tolerating it from your family?
Yeah, especially a parent.
Especially a parent. And there's a lot of people who disagree with me on this, and that's fine. You're not ready to hear that.
Right. But listen, everybody is going to have their own take on this. We're not professionals. We're not trying to diagnose anything or cure anything. You're talking about your experience. And everybody has their own individual experience. And quite honestly, anybody who does not live with what you experience is not qualified to judge.
And that's true. But I think that none of us, and even if they were, like, my brother and I lived very similar experiences, but the way he processes and handles it is very different than the way I do. And so everybody's individual. And, it's not to compare trauma or the way that we deal with it. It's just, everybody, like you said, everybody's different. We all process differently. And like, my brother still talks to her, but it's very limited,
Right.
whereas I'm just done.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's going to be that way even with still my 3 brothers and my sister and I, the 5 of us, we talk plenty about our dad and all the things that we all saw in him, but also the different experiences we had. The 5 of us, we were all dealing with the same man, but there were still different experiences, you know? Like, my next youngest, again, I said I'm the oldest. My next brother, Jack, he and I are only 16 months apart. The other 3, the 3 youngest, Joseph, Michael, and Helene, they're all from marriage number 5. They are 12, 14, and 17 years younger than me. So they grew up with him in the house. By that point, my brother and I were, when my youngest sister was born, I was 3 months away from graduating high school. So it was a very different experience growing up. Yet it was the same man. And there were a lot of similarities, a lot of differences, but a lot of perspectives.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, even my wife, she's one of four, but her and her my wife is the oldest. Her and her the second oldest have had a very different experience than the other two kids, and they all were the same parents, both throughout all four of these kids. But my wife was born in '87, her sister in '93, and then the other two were born in '98, '99, and they had very different. The two oldest had very different experiences than the two youngest because at that point they were tired, and so they got away with a lot more.
Exactly. I
So
wonder if maybe that's the benefit of being one of the younger ones or the youngest is by that point the parents are worn out
I mean,
and
I'm the youngest.
whatever.
I can say you get away with a lot, but I did get away with a lot. I will say that she never knew about, but that's
Sure.
because she would work 70, 80, 90 hours a week, and I was left to my own devices. So
Right. Well, yeah, she was making a ton of money, which good for her, but at the same time, she was working that kind of job where she was never around.
exactly.
Do you think that maybe that had anything to do with the way she treated you?
Well,
That
no,
she
because
wasn't around?
no, I don't think that. I think that because even before she had a job like that, that's how she was. So I have a half sister who was my dad from my dad's first marriage. She's about 12 years older than I am, and that was another person I was not allowed to have a relationship with. By the way, that her and I now have a very good relationship, and she's not speaking to our dad either. But um, because well, she's in her 50s now, and she's been her whole life trying to get his acceptance, and she's never going to get it with him. Um, and
You say,
anyways,
uh,
my mom would lock her in the closet, like literally as punishment. There was one story she told, and these are on my YouTube. You can go look at some. I think they also have a story time list on TikTok as well, but you can go watch some of these. But there was one time I think that it was she would lock like when she was like 6 or 7. My mom would lock her in the room at night when she would sleep, and she had to go up and go to the bathroom, but she couldn't go to the bathroom because the door was locked. So she found like a cup or something, and she would go to the bathroom in the cup. And so my mom found this and made her wear a diaper outside in front of all of her friends as like a 6-year-old as part of her punishment. There was times my mom put out cigarettes on her as punishment, because back then everybody smoked. And with my niece, my brother's youngest, she's locked her in the closet. So I know that that's a true story, you know? And so that's just kind of how and the thing is my dad didn't stand up for his daughter. Because to my dad, because here's my issue with my dad. My dad, it is all about women. That is it. That is all, that and his money is all he cares about for the most part. What he can get. Like his current like wife number 7 is I think 20 something years younger than him. And she doesn't have to work. They jet set all over the place, doing whatever, and she just basically stays drunk and high to deal with him. Like no joke, she's high and drunk literally all the time. So, but she's had a boob job, and she's 20 years younger, so he's thrilled with this. And that's what he cared. So my mom, all of his wives, that was always who he would put first.
I just don't understand it. How, as a father, do you come to that to your kids?
I don't know. And when I as a parent myself, um, whenever it's time to punish our daughter if she's in trouble or something, or to reprimand her, I think, what would my parents do? And then I do the complete opposite. Legitimately, that's what I do. I do whatever they would do. I make sure that I don't do.
How long has it been since you've seen your dad?
Seen him probably about 3 years.
Has your daughter ever met him?
Yeah.
Um,
She doesn't ask much about him. It's been a long time. The last time she saw him, I think she was 3. But all she remembers, because it was around Halloween, is that he dressed up as Beetlejuice, and which terrified her. So that's because, again, he wasn't really he wasn't around as a dad, so he doesn't realize that 3-year-olds are going to be terrified of Beetlejuice.
Do you see now? Obviously, we know your mom. That story has ended. Do you think there's any chance for a relationship between your dad and your daughter?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest challenge that I've had with my dad is a very hypocritical person, and the challenges that I have with him are things that he could easily remedy, but he chooses not to. We've given him the discussion. I've had the discussion. My sister and I have both had the discussion with him about some of it. So I will tell you what our catalyst was for this. Okay, he had come to our house, and this was that same trip with Beetlejuice, by the way. He had come to our house. And he had not even made it. He flew in. He had not even made it in the front door. We were in the driveway, right, of the house. And he pulls out his phone and he starts showing me his TikTok, right? He starts talking about the way the women were dressed at the airport. He shows me his TikTok, and it's a bunch of, half naked women or women, wearing very tight, very revealing clothing. And he's like, this is all TikTok is, blah, blah. I'm like, Dad, let me show you my algorithm. And my algorithm is true crime, current events in cars, and some funny stuff. You go on my algorithm. I would hand anybody my phone and show this. You're not going to find any half naked dancing women, right? You're just not going to have that. That would be, in my opinion, disrespectful to my wife. So you're not going to have that. And so I said to him, I was like, that's your algorithm. The reason that you see that is because
that's what you look at.
That's what you interact with. So then he gets flustered, puts his phone in, because wife's right there. And he puts his phone in his pocket and starts changing the thing. Then my dad is Jewish. He is Jewish, but he doesn't practice at all. And so this was around the time that Kanye West was dropping a lot of anti-Semitic, comments and things like that. So my dad decides to drop a slur. I'm sure you can guess what it is on Kanye West related to his race.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, that's what he did first. Sorry, I'm going to back up. That's what he did first. And our daughter's standing there. That's a word that we don't use. We don't tolerate in this household. We are accepting of everybody, and everybody is beautiful, regardless of skin color. We don't use that term, right? We don't use any derogatory terms against people's races or anything like that. Now, we might call you dumb, but that's going to be about you just being dumb. But it's not going to be anything like that. So that was the first thing. Then he went to the other thing. And so Alyssa pops back at him, and then he starts talking about, I think his exact words were, you see these women at the airport dressing, it's like, and people wonder why they're not, and people say they're not asking for it or something like that. Like, basically they're not asking to get raped because of or assaulted because of what they're wearing. And again, our daughter's right there. So my wife pops back before I can say anything and says, so Victoria's 14 years old. She's on the beach in a bikini. She's asking for it. Right. And then my wife, in the anger, and I support her with this, pop back at my dad. And she goes, the world's going to be a lot better place when your generation is gone. And which was harsh. She did say that, and it's harsh.
Yeah, harsh. But you know what? Sometimes the things that are the most true are the harshest to hear.
Yeah, and not to say that, my dad is technically the very end of silent gen, and not to say that boomers and silent gen are all that way, because they absolutely are not. You can't make that blanket statement. But he is, and in that generation, it's a lot of men who are that way. And you couple that
people with his mindset. That's
that's what she. I just don't want anybody to think that we're coming after the baby boom generation as a whole. But there's a lot of wonderful boomers out there that would stand up against that kind of rhetoric. But that's what she said. So now my dad went from loving my wife to now she's a horrible human being. And that goes to part of the problem. Like, you're not going to come in here into my house. And I wasn't supposed to know that. He had sent that in an email. It was supposed to be to my sister, but sent it to me on accident. Yeah, oops. So anyways, that's kind of that situation with that. And so my dad, yeah, there's hope for him because again, he's not a malicious person. He's just selfish. I enjoy being around my dad. He's fun to be around when he is around, but at the same time, he's going to be 80 this year. And it's like, either I have to learn to accept it where it's at or not, as I think where I'm at, because he said flat out he's not going to change. What really kind of stings though from him is when we brought it up, my sister and I brought it up and wrote him a letter like, hey, here's a roadmap on what we would like you to do for us to have a relationship. Like, we're literally spelling it out on a sheet of paper.
Yeah.
And his response to it was, my kids and grandkids aren't worth it. Literally what he said.
So if your kids
aren't worth it,
clearly nothing's worth it.
Yeah, it's not worth it, which is why it becomes more challenging to kind of deal with. And on my sister's side of things, my sister, and I don't go down the political arena that much, but I'm going to do it in this case. So my dad is very much a Republican, and my sister is very much a Democrat. Okay, she lives in California. She's got 3 girls. I say that 3 girls in caveat because I don't want to misgender here, because her oldest child is trans and her second child is bi, the other child, straight. But so she's dealing with, kids that are in the LGBTQIA, plus community. And my dad is just absolutely brutal to all of them. Says that, my sister owns a business and she's very successful in her business. She's very educated. She continues to learn. Even as, in her 50s, she never wants to stop. And he calls her stupid because she's a Democrat, right? And she doesn't return that same thing. And I'm like, dude, her name's Jamie. It's like, Jamie's not stupid, Dad. Like, she owns her business. She's educated. She's been very successful in her the venture she's done in life. She's had a successful career when she was still in corporate America. Like, she's not dumb. She just doesn't vote the way you vote. And I said to him, and that's okay, because I said, in California, it doesn't matter if she was Republican anyways. That state's always going to go blue. And so that's kind of the discussion that we've had about that. And I'm like, why are we calling people names? Right. Like, over this, and this, especially your own child, like, and you wonder why they don't want anything to do with you, but she constantly tries to seek validation and approval. So.
Yeah, I get it. So, even with all of the issues with his personality and some of the disrespectful comments, it does sound like he has some redeeming qualities.
He has some redeeming. He does have some redeeming qualities, but it's challenging.
Yeah, and I can totally understand why you and Melissa are so protective of her, from family. You have to be.
You have to be, and I think especially from family. And she doesn't need the generational trauma. I'm not going to say that our daughter's going to get out of this unscathed, right? I'm not going to say that she's going to get out of this unscathed, as far as trauma goes. But she's not going to have the trauma that, look, my wife and I are millennials. We were raised both by baby boomers. My dad, again, last year of silent gen. My mom's an early boomer. My wife's parents are late boomers, and the way that they were raised, the way that they were brought up by their parents is very different. Then the way that they brought us up, and I hate to say it, but it's the truth, for a lot of the parents of that generation, they weren't involved. There literally had to be, there usually had to be commercials. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? There's a commercial to remember to hug your kids. It was, you didn't know where we were till we just be home by the time the streets are on. They just weren't that involved. And so when they did parent, it tended to be a little bit harsher. And so that's where we got our ability to parent. But now we're more hands-on because it's with the internet and everything. It's a very different world than it was. And it's not, and unfortunately, not that the world was ever safe to begin with, and not that it was safer back then, but with the internet, now these people have much better access and can track exactly where you are at any given time. That's what the internet did. So that's what made it different. And so now we have to be a lot more protective of our kids because of all of this. And on top of that, just not to go down this rabbit hole real quick, but the bad stuff that we're talking about happened then too. It just got swept under the rug.
Right. Well, that's the thing. We live in a technology age. We're surrounded by smartphones and smart devices, and it's a 24-hour news cycle that just never stops.
Yeah.
So all of this stuff was happening then. We just didn't know about it. Now we have phones with, whatever news app you're connected to, that you're constantly getting alerts, whether it's, CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or your local news company or Facebook or TikTok. There is no escape. So we're drowning in all of the horrible things that were happening. Yeah, they
Well,
were all
I
happening
agree.
then. We just didn't know about it.
I agree. Like, and I think real briefly to a story that I did a few months ago, in Oregon, where a guy was this was in Oregon, and a dad was having, there was a sleepover for his girls, his daughter, and she had some friends over, and he drugged their smoothies, these 12-year-old girls. And one of the girls felt weird about it, didn't take the smoothie, like pretended to drink it, called, immediately got picked up. That was in Oregon 30 years ago. Where I live in Tennessee and where you live in Florida, we would have never heard that story.
Right.
But now we do. And now we're also more about holding people accountable for their actions, which was something that wasn't done back then either.
Yeah.
Somebody said that was in Oklahoma. No, it was in Oregon. It might have been a separate incident in Oklahoma, but what I'm talking about is specifically in Oregon.
Okay.
I was just addressing that real quick.
Sorry, say that again.
I said I was just wanting to address that real quick because there might be another one. And if there is one in Oklahoma, again, we wouldn't know about that had she not just said it.
Yeah.
Oklahoma. So that's my point. That's what social media does, is it gives us a lot more access to the stuff than we once had before.
Which is good and bad.
It's good and bad.
It's sometimes it depends on the topic. Sometimes it's things that we need to know about. Sometimes it's things that we really don't need to know about. I mean, horrible things happen all the time, but and sometimes I wonder: are we becoming immune to it? Are we becoming less compassionate, less involved in society because there's so much shit going on because we're constantly hearing about it? So at a certain point, everybody's like, "Fuck it, I'm just done with everything that's going on in the world, and I just don't want to
Retreat.
deal with it. I'm going to retreat. I don't want to deal with it anymore."
So
One of the somebody on TikTok, one of the TikTok followers, is created by Nikki, said she asked you, "Was your mom the same way with your brother and your sister as she was with you?"
So my half sister was from my dad's first marriage, and I didn't grow up with her, so I can only go off the stories that I've been told. My brother's a little bit different, honestly. If I had to say something, my brother got more trauma than I did, because when my parents got divorced, you know how most of the time there's going to be a small binder of legal paperwork.
Of course.
Our parents' divorce was multiple binders this thick. It was literally studied by law school by I think it's the University of Memphis, like their law school, on how bizarre of a divorce case it was. They bought their firearms because of the other one. My mom would often have my dad arrested while he was dropping us off, for contempt of court violations, child support violations, whatever the case was. He would have that happen. There was one time where he had moved to Florida basically just to get away from her. He had like a 3 or 4 day weekend with me. She would not let me fly. So he drove from Miami to Memphis to come get me and then immediately turn around, drive back to Miami to bring me back a couple of days later. And this is what I'm saying, where he's got some redeeming qualities, right?
Right.
Somebody said University of Memphis studied, so somebody knows this. Yeah, that's my parents' divorce case. So anyways, we got caught in traffic in Chattanooga. So he gets off with a payphone, calls my mom up, and says, "Hey, we're going to be late. We got caught in traffic," right?
Yeah.
And then I had locked the keys in the car during that stop, apparently.
Oh.
And so, we were in later. So my mom, he tells her all of this, and she's like, "It's fine, whatever." And we get to the house to drop me off. She's got police waiting on him.
Because
She loves using the police, by the way, if you can't tell. Loves it.
Lady. I mean, I want to say what is wrong with this one, but we kind of broke it down.
Yeah. So so nobody was immune to it. But my brother, though, going back to your answer to your question. So
Yeah.
in their divorce, when they got divorced, my mom is all about the money. My dad is too, actually, for that matter. My dad's about the money and the women. My dad's, yeah, money and women, and my mom is just the money. So my dad was trying to figure out what she did with all the money because before she filed for divorce, she cleaned everything out, right? And again, this is before the days of electronic computers where you can easily follow a paper trail.
Right.
And basically, he was having my brother. Well, he stole my brother's house key so he could break into the house, and was having my brother change out. He had a micro cassette recorder that he had hid under her bed so that when she picked up the phone, it would record. And she was trying to figure out where the money went, and do that, So he would have my brother change out those tapes for him, which is something that and my brother was probably like 11 or 12, right? So something really bad, whatever. And then with my stepdad was just as abusive to him. My brother's first job was at McDonald's, which was about 2 miles from our house. And we both had to earn our money to buy our first car, which is fine. That's fine. But even if it was cold, rainy, snowy, whatever it is, they made him walk to work every time, even if it was pouring rain. I remember one time that my mom actually said to our stepdad, "I'm going to go get him because it's raining." And he goes, "You're not going to make him a little sissy. Sit your ass back down." And wouldn't let her go get him. And my brother had to walk home, in the rain, soaked. So my brother got a lot of, me being 6.5 years younger, I had a very different experience. But, that's why I think my brother's got a lot of unresolved trauma. And, it's just, he's got his own challenges. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah, your brother sounds like somebody who I'd love to talk to also.
The thing is, he wouldn't talk about any of this. He refuses.
Does he refuse because he's not ready to talk about it, or
I don't know.
because
He
just
shuts down
trying to be more
anytime I broach the subject, he shuts down.
Wow. Look, unfortunately, in certain situations, I have to say to each their own. This is one of the very reasons why I'm doing this podcast, because there are so many people out there that have horrible traumatic stories and just will not address them, and not talking about it, not processing it, pretending it didn't happen, ignoring it till it goes away. It doesn't help.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't help the person who it most directly affected, and it doesn't help the people that are indirectly affected.
Yeah, I agree with you. But you people have to be ready to have that discussion. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't force. It's like trying to get somebody to quit smoking. You can't force somebody to quit doing something. You can tell them, give them the advice, tell them how it makes you feel. Say like, "Hey, I see this with you. Maybe you might want to get some help with it or whatever." But it's up to them to ultimately pull the trigger on that.
Absolutely. In spite of everything that you've gone through with your mom, do you think you're a better person because of it?
This is one of those situations where it's not an ideal situation. Do I wish that I could have had things go a little bit differently in my life? I mean, absolutely. Do I wish that I had a mom that was part of my child's life, that loved my wife, loved my child, was for all intents and purposes, a normal mom? Yeah, I would love that, right? Because you mourn what you're supposed to have. I mourn the family that I don't have, that I never got to have, and I never will have. From the parent-child relationship. Now, what I can do about that is I can have a better parent-child relationship with my own child and give her what I never got, and that's what my intent was. But yeah, I mean, it's rough, and 6 years in, it's still, you'll still have moments or things that hurt because even when you're dealing with terrible people, black and white characters only exist in movies and literature, right? There's a lot of gray. Like, I have a lot of really wonderful memories with my mom, but it's gotten to a point where the bad doesn't outweigh the good anymore.
Right. And
And
when
that's
you
where
need
it's at.
to cut it off.
Yeah, when it starts affecting your mental health, it starts impacting your child, it starts impacting your relationships, then you need to kind of take a hard look at it, And unfortunately, there's a lot of, and I'm going to make this very clear because I don't want to offend anybody. There's a difference between being a mom of boys and being a hashtag boy mom. And if you are a hashtag boy mom, that tends to be where this, like, you don't tend to have this issue as much with dads and daughters. I mean, it does happen, but the hashtag boy moms, like these moms that are like what I'm talking about, like my mom, they can't stand anybody. Like, nobody's, in their eyes, nobody will ever love their son more than they do. No woman will ever be good enough. No girlfriend will ever be good enough. Nothing will ever be good enough for their precious little boy.
Yeah, that was exactly how it was with my grandmother, with my father's mother.
Yeah.
She basically my dad to believe nobody's gonna be good enough for you. You walk on water, and for a long time he believed it. Probably a big part of why he was married and divorced 5 times, because he was full of himself and full of shit at the same time. But
Yeah.
he just still thought that he was the bee's. Nobody could make him see otherwise, no matter what.
Yeah. It's tough.
It is. It's tough, and as a parent, you're supposed to be there and fully protective of your children, not the opposite. And
Well, unfortunately,
thankfully,
go ahead. Sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to just say, with, unfortunately, with the kind of content I cover, one thing that I learn is oftentimes people aren't safe in their homes with the people who are supposed to protect them, and that's a very unfortunate thing.
Let's talk about that. Um, regarding the content that you cover, because this is what you do, because this is essentially your day job, you see a lot more of that content than most of the rest of us do. Of course, we see it through your page, but you get to see a lot of the worst shit in society. Do you believe that society is on a downward spiral because of the reports that you see, because of the news stories that you
Yes.
see? Yeah.
Yes.
Um,
Particularly, I'm gonna ruffle some feathers with this one,
okay.
but particularly with men.
How do you mean?
Um, so I was doing a sub live last night. We were talking about this, and I was talking to Jim Schmidt. I gotta take my book down real quick from TikTok. They're yelling at me. But basically, I was talking about, I had been contacted by the University of Edinburgh in Scotland through their Child Light Institute, and they do studies. I'll pull it up and read it to you. I'll just
Okay.
read it to you. And I did this video a while ago, but I'm gonna do it probably again because we were talking about this. So, long and short, a while ago, I did a video on. Well, I was on TikTok and Instagram. Let's pull it up here. Sorry, I'm trying to walk down here. On Tik, and basically it was I just was like, I choose the bear. Also, it was a comment that somebody made that said it was something like, old enough to pee, old enough for me, which a lot of people are like, oh, it's just a joke. No, it's not a joke. The SA of infants is not funny. And if you find it funny, then you're messed up. It's not a joke. And it maybe could be funny, I guess, if it didn't happen so often. And, again, with the stuff I cover, I'm a little bit jaded from it. But going back to what we were talking about, there was something that I was sent to, and I'm going to read you something. Okay. So taking aside the fact that you just had that Pellicote trial in France where the husband had been, sedating his wife for decades to let men abuse her, there was a Telegram group that was found. My original video said that it was by police, but apparently it's by journalists, with 72,000 men in it, sharing photos, sharing live essays of their wives, their mothers, their sisters, their daughters, telling people how to create substances in order to make them sedated so that they could continue to do this. That's one. But here I'm going to read you this headline. Okay, this is a headline that came off of this study, and I'm going to do a thing on. I did this back in late 23, but that it's millions of men would SA children if secrecy was assured. So they did this study, and it's, hold on, let me get to it. Details. The research carried out in conjunction with University of New South Wales in Australia suggested that half of those adolescents in Europe, Africa, and North America who experienced child exploitation and abuse did so before their 13th birthday. Now that's in this, but the biggest thing is, hold on. They are the actual numbers. Okay, here's what it is. This is a study involving 4,500 men from the UK, Australia, and the United States. And it was, again, done by the Edinburgh University's Child Light Safety Institute. And it said more than 1 in 20 men, said that they would have S contact with a child between the ages of 10 and 14 if they knew it would be kept secret. Okay. About 1 in 7, 15% of those surveyed said they would consider S contact with a child if they were certain no one would find out. Researchers said the proportion equates to millions of men across the 3 countries if applied to current population data. Among British men, 1.6% said that they would definitely have S contact with 12 to 14-year-olds if it stayed a secret, and 2.6% said it was very likely. The proportion was higher in Australia and higher again in the US. It estimates that 1 in 4 girls. Okay, we already know the estimates on that. So, yeah, when I cover stuff like this and I see stuff like this, and then I see the cases that I cover, yeah, I think that, this is why when people think that, oh, it's only a handful of men, this is more than a handful of men. And these are just the ones who admitted it.
Right. It's just the ones who admitted it because they know that it's a secret survey.
Yeah. And honestly, I feel bad for women for having to be on the planet with us, truthfully. I'm not trying to gender shame myself here, but I mean, the issue is that for women, you don't know which men are safe and which ones aren't. So you have to assume that none of them are, that for their safety, they have no choice. But it's such a problem. And we can sit here as men and call these other men out for this type of behavior and things like that. And that's what we did with my dad. Again, I don't think my dad would be part of that population, but my dad is clearly fine with SA, depending on what the girl's wearing. So we call him out on it, and that's part of it is you have to call them out. And so anyways, I know that's going down a different rabbit hole.
It's okay.
But no, I feel like humanity is definitely on a downward spiral.
They do need to be called out on it in situations like that. It's never acceptable. It's not acceptable. It doesn't quite honestly matter whether it's a child, a teenager, adult, senior citizen, any age. It does not matter. Yet it's happening anyway.
And the thing is, I think it's going to get worse. And again, I'll just touch very lightly on this. I did a video yesterday. We all heard that Zuckerberg is rolling back the fact checking for community notes, which is similar, I think, to what Twitter or X does. But the other thing that they're rolling back is their hateful content moderation. So now you can literally say things like, you can say, oh, that woman, women are property. You can call somebody, if they're, you can call somebody a slur, and it's not going to be moderated anymore. And I think that when you have that, and you have that, at the fingertips of millions of people with social media, it used to be 30, 40 years ago, it used to be, I have this crazy, oh, that's just Uncle Daryl, being a racist conspiracy theorist. Well, now Uncle Daryl can go on Facebook and find 15,000 other groups with people who agree with them, and it empowers all of them to do so. And so I think that when you look at studies like this, you look at the stories that are out there, you look at the fact that they're rolling back the hateful content moderation, I think things are about to get a lot worse.
Probably for at least the last 10 years or so, I've been saying the downfall of society, and the further we go on, the more true it seems to be. And obviously, we're using social media, we're using Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram to do things like this. For me, for my podcast, you for your podcast, you for your news updates, you for everything that you do, growing your following. You're doing great things. You're not doing the shitty things that those folks are doing. Yet the shitty things are still out there, and there's always
going to be a market for that. That's the issue. We have, I think Jim Schmidt's probably still in here. The issue with social media is that while it's a wonderful tool and offers a lot of great things, for those people who are listening who don't know who Jim Schmidt is Gabby Petito's bonus father. If you don't know who Gabby Petito is, she was the young woman who a few years ago was, for the sake of social media, I will say unalived by her boyfriend. And then he left Wyoming, left her there, and came back to Florida. Now, I was covering that case when it happened, and we were trying to be truthful, but there are people who will put out information that was fake, that was completely fabricated. They would fabricate YouTube videos because it doesn't matter if it's real or it's not. It's going to make that creator money if it goes viral. And that's
Right.
the issue with this kind of stuff. That's why fact checking, I think, is important. But you also have, but it's the same people that do that are the same people that don't care. You know, Jim and I were talking about this last night. Like when people come in and start talking crap about a case that we're covering, and they're talking bad about the parents or the person or whatever the case is, I'll remind them like, hey, you know, the Petito Schmidt family comes into my life quite a bit. Would you want to be talking about Gabby in such a way that you would be embarrassed for what you're saying when they come in? You got to remember, these are real people, real stories, real victims, real families behind them. And, you know, have a modicum of respect and empathy. It takes nothing for you to not be a shitty person. But a
Yeah.
lot of people like being shitty people, which is why I like to stir the pot and call them out.
And I love that you do.
Full
I love
circle.
it's called full band circle. Do you think that this might seem like a weird question, but because of all the trauma that you dealt with early on in your life and even more recently within the last few years with your mom, do you think maybe that has kind of been part of what's drawn you to do this work? And I know this
Um,
isn't how you started, but this is what it has evolved into.
well, yeah, I mean, I never anticipated this. I've been with corporate America. I've been in medical sales, and you know, in the last job I had, which was last January, I got laid off, and I was like, I'm just not going back, and I'm going to try to do this, and you know, put up 3 books and things like that.
Right.
So I really hope TikTok doesn't go away, but because if not, I got to go back to corporate America, which I don't want to do, anyways. But yeah, I was I don't have a platform without everybody that's in here, right? That's in here now that supports my content and makes stuff. And I'm very grateful to each and every one of them. And there's no buts. I am. When I made that first video, I did not expect what happened. I didn't expect to blow up on social media. I didn't expect to go viral and have all these people be like, hey, me too. I felt that I was on an island alone, you know, with this kind of stuff. And there and I'm not, and they aren't. And I think that that was part of the thing is that we all came together. And then as a man having that discussion, there weren't a lot of men speaking out on, especially against their moms. Right.
Right.
So I think that we all kind of came together at a point, because let's be real, those same types of moms that we're talking about are brutal on their daughters as well. You know, like if they didn't have any sons, they would have been that way if they did, but because they didn't, they're brutal on their daughters. And so, you know, we had a lot of camaraderie, and I think a lot of people related, and I think that it really helped. And the way it transitioned to true crime was actually during Gabby Petito, because I actually, believe it or not, and this might be a surprise for a lot of my listeners and followers to hear, I wasn't interested in true crime. I had no interest in it at all. And my wife was like very closely following the Gabby Petito case. And when the Moab footage came out, she said, you need to sit your ass down and watch this. And I did. And the reason she had me do that was because of the way that Brian Laundrie, the way he spoke, the way he gaslit, the way that his mannerisms were, his tone and cadence, his movements were all exactly like my mom. It was like watching a young, bald version of my mom.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. So I was like, oh, this definitely, you know, it goes with my content. I'll start covering this. And then I became, I think, one of the top creators covering Gabby Petito. And it's kind of just gone on since then, to the point of, you know, I grew from like 50, 60,000 followers during Gabby to 250. And now we just hit 1.6 million. So, you know, it's a very interesting thing. But the way I look at it is while this platform wasn't unexpected, or while it was unexpected, and while this platform, was not something that I actively tried to get, I was graced with it. And I feel that I owe it, since I was, to try to do good things with it.
Right.
That's my sentiments. And, you know, a lot of people feel differently on that. I mean, I got to make money. I got to get video views, because I have to, you know, I have to ask for subscribers. I have to ask for gifts. I have to do all that stuff because I need to make money. But at the same time, you know, when I talk about stories and I talk about, you know, certain situations, it's in that moment, it's not about the views. It's not about the gifts. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about the individuals. Nikki just got here. It's about Nikki. It's about, you know,
Yeah,
Jim.
it's
It's
about
about Joe.
Nikki
It's about
and Joe and Jim and Tara. It's about them.
yeah. It's about them. And it's not about, you know, it's about making sure that we're respectful to the memories of the people that we're talking about, and we're respectful to the families. And that's something that's important when we cover these, because you can inform people who are interested in these types of cases You can inform people of that, but you can do it in a way that's respectful. That's not, you know what I'm saying? That doesn't cause harm to the family, the case, or the victim. And so when that happened and we realized that we could do that, I was like, well, this is something that we keep doing, because unfortunately you can go on social media and there's a ton of people covering, we know we're talking about, since Jim and Nikki are here, I know Nikki at least, there were a lot of creators covering Gabby Petito. All right. You could tell who did it for the views and who did it because they wanted information out there.
Right.
You can easily tell. And because one thing that you can't fake is empathy.
Right.
So
yeah, and I'm glad that you were one of the ones that were doing it to get the information out there to actually help people like Nikki and Jim and Joe and Tara, and not one of the bullshit creators that was just trying to get a following and putting absolute garbage out there.
yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. You know, you want the stories, you want to put out the correct information, but like I said before, Nikki and Jim are in this chat. Would you want to be talking about Gabby and have them see something as the family that you would be embarrassed saying? You know,
Yeah.
that's what I saw. That's what I said yesterday on the sub live to Jim. And I said to you a few minutes ago, these are real victims. These were people who had friends and family members and loved ones and who were loved, right? And who
Right.
have family that misses them and friends that miss them and families that are mourning them. And you need to be respectful of that. It's not your entertainment, it's real life.
Right. The problem is
Off topic a little bit.
Sorry?
Sorry, that went off topic a little bit.
No, you're totally good. I mean, look, it's all another form of, it's one of the many forms of trauma. Unfortunately, something like that, where there are people out there that are putting negative content or false content out there, whether it's about somebody like Gabby or anybody else, any other story, until they're confronted, until, like, if somebody was, let's just, unfortunately, let's use Gabby as an example. If there was somebody out there, content creator, that was saying something negative about Gabby, until Nikki
They did.
or Joe or Tara goes and
They did. That did exist. There were a lot of people who were pro Brian Laundrie and were
no,
making things
absolutely,
up.
but they're not going to give a shit about what they're doing
No, they're
until,
not.
and maybe not even if somebody like Jim and Joe and Tara end up in chat. As long as they're not there, as long as family members aren't there, then it's almost like it doesn't matter to them. It's just another topic for them to talk shit about. Like,
Yeah.
that is honestly one of the biggest problems with society. Like, yeah, if you're gonna be on TikTok and Instagram or wherever and put your content out and make money, fine, but to do it at somebody else's expense,
Exactly.
I will never understand. If I live to be 1,000 years old, I will never understand how people have the capacity to do something.
Yeah.
Because it's they don't understand the trauma that they're creating by putting in their content.
Or they do understand and they just don't care.
Well, that's the other side of it. They don't give a shit.
Yeah, I know they don't give a
That's
shit.
why there are people out there like you and me who get to do things like this for the most positive reasons. And there are going to be people out there that disagree with what you're doing, how you're putting it out there. There are probably going to be people who disagree with me and what I'm doing. And I don't think I have quite enough of a following yet to have a lot of haters, but I'm sure in time, give me long enough, there will be somebody who will, and whatever. They can feel whatever they want. As long as you're doing what you're doing with the best of intentions, and that's what matters.
Exactly. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly on that.
Definitely. I think we have probably covered just about everything that we need to cover.
I have to get the point across, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I can't thank you enough for all of this, for everything you've been willing to talk about, for sharing you with the TikTok audience. And by the way, everybody who is listening on TikTok right now, if you've been watching for a while, if you're just joining, my name is Nick Gaylord. I am the host of Our Dev Dads podcast. Justin has been gracious enough to allow me to interview him today and to tell this story. If you would not mind, please give me a follow, subscribe to my feed as well on TikTok, also on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. You can find me on all platforms at Our Dead Dads Pod. Uh, Justin obviously has a massive following, which is why I'm so glad that he was willing to share this on TikTok today. I'm trying to grow my following so that I can continue to do live videos and spread the word about my podcast and spread the message that of what I'm trying to do, which is help people who have dealt with all forms of grief, loss, and trauma. As we've been discussing, today's conversation was the first one that I've had in the almost year that I've been doing this that was centered around grief of a loss of a relationship with somebody who is still alive. It's been an incredible conversation, and again, I'm so thankful that you were willing to do this.
No, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share it, and I hope that your listeners get something out of it. And yeah, and for anybody who is coming in on TikTok who's late, this is on Nick's YouTube, and I'm streaming it live on mine as well. Give him a follow over there. You can go over and rewind this to the beginning and watch it or listen to it. So if you came in late and you're like, man, I missed it, you can go back and do that. And I would encourage my followers to give Nick a follow. Because he is doing some good work, and I think that this is an important podcast. And at the same time, while we're here, if you can reach out to him, especially if you follow him back, you can reach out to him and say that, hey, I'd like to share my story, and he will give you a platform. I'm not gonna say everybody, but he'll do his best to give you a platform.
Absolutely, thank you for that. Anybody, if you have a story of grief, loss, trauma that you want to discuss, I just want to say I know the name of the podcast is Our Dead Dads. And again, without getting into a lot of details, I invite anybody who wants to know how the podcast came about, how the name came about, please find my podcast, listen to episode 1. That will be me telling my story. You'll learn all about it. But yeah, if you have any story, dad, mom, loss of siblings, children, and it can be anything, jobs, marriages, life savings, whatever loss that you have experienced that you want to talk about, whether you have talked about it before, whether you're holding on to grief and you haven't even begun to process it. That's what you can, if you want to reach out to me, I have a website, it's ourdeadbats.com. When you get to the page, up right hand corner of the page, there will be a link that says contact us. You hover over that, and the first drop down is be a guest. There will be a form that you can fill out. It will direct me and set up a conversation. And anybody who does want to reach out, definitely look forward to hearing from you. We have one last thing that we're going to take care of in this interview. It's something that I do in all interviews, and finally, for the first time, I get to do it live. It's going to be a session of random questions. I have a spreadsheet with hundreds of them. This has absolutely, at least intentionally, has nothing to do with anything we've just talked about. It's kind of just a nice way to level off the interview and on a happy note instead of doing trauma.
All right.
So you
I'm ready. I'm ready for it.
all right. I know it's nothing that you can study for, so we'll see how this goes.
All right.
What is your favorite
What's my favorite what?
number?
Number?
Yes.
I don't know if I have a favorite
Again,
number.
totally random questions.
I don't know if I have a favorite number. 1573.
1573. Okay. Do you have any tattoos?
Nope.
Do you prefer fresh food or fried food?
Depends on the mood. I mean, I probably prefer fried food because I'm from the
Okay.
South, but I
Okay.
also like fresh and healthy as well.
Okay. What was your major in college?
Marketing.
Tell me 2 of the items on your bucket list.
2 of the items on what?
On your bucket list.
I want a Porsche and to travel more specifically to Australia and New Zealand. Those are 2 things.
Okay. Well, then let's see if we can build up your following and get a lot more subscribers and followers, and maybe we can get you that Porsche and maybe get you to Australia and New Zealand.
I don't have a place to put the Porsche. That's the issue. But
well, if you have the money to afford the Porsche, then maybe you'll have enough money to build a big garage.
Bigger garage, yeah.
There you go. What is your favorite season?
My favorite season, honestly, probably fall.
Okay. What is your deepest fear?
Death.
How tall are
That went deep. Huh? I'm 5'10".
you? 5'10". Sorry, were you gonna?
I said so. I went deep there for a second.
You did. Um, what is all right? Fine. Maybe this one would be a little bit about what we were talking about. What is humanity's most redeeming quality?
When needed to, they can come together for the good of others. Most of the time.
Most of the time, I think that's absolutely true. What is your favorite dessert?
It depends. Typically, I'm a pretty big fan of key lime pie, though.
Okay. Kim loves key lime pie.
Too.
Have you ever tasted soap?
But yeah, my mom used to not wash my mouth out with soap.
There
Just
you
taste it all the time.
because you're such a bad kid.
It was ivory.
Ivory. Was it always ivory?
It was always ivory.
Oh,
She liked ivory because it floated in the bath, so you could find it easily.
okay. Some kids got to have a variety of soap, so
I didn't get a variety. You think she was going to use the decorative soaps on me? No, I got ivory.
you got ivory. What phrase do you find yourself typing the most?
What phrase?
Yeah.
Um, Probably something along the lines of "you know so much that isn't so."
Okay.
That's one. Also, there's a George Carlin quote I do a lot.
What would that mean?
It was from a skit. It's think about how stupid the average person is, and then remember that 50% of the people are dumber than that.
I love George Carlin.
I don't think that applies to most of my followers, for the record,
No.
but it does apply to it does apply to several commenters.
Right. You've got the better end of quality of followers.
Yeah.
What's your favorite holiday?
Holiday?
Yes.
Toss it between Halloween and Christmas.
Okay. Do you believe in love at first sight?
Yes.
Have you ever? Well, we know this one. Have you ever changed careers?
Yes.
Say a word in Spanish.
What word?
Any word. Just to prove that you know Spanish.
I don't know that much Spanish, but vamos a la playa.
Okay.
Go to the beach.
Love going to the beach. Do you like clothes shopping?
They're like, what?
Clothes shopping.
I do.
Okay. Oh, hang on. This one just locked up. Okay, here we go. Do you like the name Charlie or girl?
Charlie, it doesn't bother me. I feel indifferent.
Okay. What is your favorite breakfast?
I don't know if I really have a favorite. I mean, I like bacon, egg, sausage. I'm a big fan of egg muffins.
Nice. Can you touch your toes without bending your knees?
Not anymore.
Godfather or Star Wars?
I've never seen Star Wars,
Never seen Star Wars.
and now I won't see it specifically because of reactions like that.
I'm sorry. I'm just surprised.
Yeah, well, never seen it.
It's not a bad thing. Are you a fan of the Godfather movies?
Yeah.
Okay. What is your go-to snack?
It depends on what we have in the house. Last night it was popcorn.
Nice. What was your first job?
Sweeping up at a hardware store.
Okay. What is your favorite way to work out?
I don't.
You TikTok.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I need to. I'm getting older.
Okay. I love when this question comes up. Are women complicated?
No.
What is going on? I'm sorry. I'm having computer trouble now. Okay. Would your 12-year-old self think that you were cool?
Probably.
Probably.
Cooler than he was.
That's right. Fill in the blank. Taylor Swift is
An artist. That's where I'm going to leave that at.
absolutely. What are you most looking forward to?
In general,
Yes.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I don't know.
Okay. That's okay. Do you have any friends taller than 6'4"?
I don't think so.
Uh, what is the fastest speed that you've ever driven in a car?
160.
160.
I'm lucky I'm not dead. Let's put that.
You loved the adventure in your younger life.
It was a Porsche, by the way.
It was a Porsche. Is that why you want one?
It's one of the reasons. Yeah.
Okay. Is it because you want to try to go over 160? Or
I do not. I just like the car.
you just like the car? Okay. What is your favorite type of tea?
Unsweet. Just general plain unsweet.
You and me both. Who is your hero?
You know what? This is going to sound cliche, but my daughter. I saw that little girl for 43 days in the NICU fight more in 43 days than most people do in their whole life.
It's not cliche at all. It's a perfect answer. Last question. If you could have dinner with any two people, alive or dead, who would it
John DeLorean will be one of them. And, let's throw Johnny Depp into that mix.
be? Okay. Any particular reason for either one of them?
Well, I own a DeLorean, so that's part of it. And then if you can't tell, I love Johnny Depp.
Well, yes. Yeah, we've had
that's signed, by the way, for anybody who's seeing this. It's not like some random printed out photo. My buddy took that photo and had Johnny sign it for me.
That's right. Well, this has truly been an incredible experience. I'm so happy and honored that you were my first live interview, and that we have had a chance to connect and get to know each other. And I know that there will be a lot more of it. So seriously, thank you so
Absolutely.
much for introducing me to your audience. Thank you so much just for the time and the willingness to share part of your life with me and with everybody.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you having me and the opportunity to share the story and letting a lot of people listen. And hopefully it helps. If it helps one person, it was worth it.
Absolutely. That's the tagline of my podcast is changing the world one damaged soul at a time. So I believe that you can help just one person, you're making a difference.
I agree. I agree with that. Well, thank you again, Nick. I appreciate you having me, and anytime I'd be happy to.
Definitely. Absolutely. I really appreciate it, Justin. And again, to everybody else, if you have a story of grief and loss to share, you might want to be considered as a future guest on Our Dead Dads. Please go to ourdeaddads.com, go to the contact us link, and then select be a guest, fill out the form, send it in, and you just might be able to tell your story, carry on this mission of helping ourselves, helping so many others. There are no rules to navigating grief. There's no timeline for doing it either. Everybody needs to go at their own pace, but the most important part is taking the first step. Whether you want to tell your story or you just want to listen to others tell their stories, the most important thing to understand is that nobody is alone in grief or should ever feel like they don't have somebody who will listen to them or talk to them. Here at Our Dead Dads, within the safe space of this community, you always have them. Thank you to everybody for listening. Please don't forget to follow the show everywhere. Check out ourdeaddads.com and spread the word about the show. This is Our Dead Dads, where we're changing the world one soul at a time. See you next time.
Bye. We clear? No.
How do I stop this? How do I stop the recording?
There should be a thing at the bottom that says, or at the top that says stop recording on your top right.
Oh, it's true.